So we're having this conversation because I just want to make you aware of these dangers so that you're more cautious. And you try to figure out what you can tolerate here. And, if you're finding yourself where you're on this path, you're meditating your ass off and so forth, and you're just like, you're in a deep depression, some deep dark night of the soul type of deal. And, what do you do in this case? Well, some people will say, fuck it, just push through it. And everything will be great in the end. Well, you have to be careful. That might have worked for them, given where they are at, what their past lives were, if you want to say that, what their genetics are, and a ton of other things, what their physical health is like. All of these factors play into it. You might not be able to do that. So you have to be willing to let go and take a step back. There's one of my favorite Bond movies. I've watched all the Bond movies. I'm a pretty big fan, especially the old ones. The new ones I'm not so interested in anymore. It seems like they've kind of degraded. But some of the really old classic ones, the Sean Connery ones and so forth, I loved to watch those when I was younger. And there was one that they used to run on HBO like all the time. Never Say Never Again. It was actually one of the last Sean Connery Bond movies. He came back to do it. I think it's one of the best ones. And the villain in that movie is great. I don't know who the actor's name is, but there's this one scene in that Bond movie, somewhere towards like the first third of the movie, where, of course, this was all set like in the 70s probably in the 70s or 80s. And so Bond is facing off against this Bond villain, and this Bond villain, this was the time of arcade machines and video games were just coming online. So this Bond movie actually featured some like an arcade, and there was this like classy like hotel, in Europe somewhere, where this Bond villain, he made his own like arcade game, and it was this game of world domination. And so he challenges James Bond to sit down to play this game of world domination with him. And it's this kind of interesting, it's almost like a ping pong table, but it's got this like digital screen instead of a net. And they're both sitting on two ends of this ping pong table sort of arcade machine. And they have these two controls. It's almost like airplane joysticks, but they have two of them each. The Bond villain over here holding him and the Bond character over here holding him. And now, they're playing this game, and we're looking at it from the audience's perspective. And so, but there's a twist because, of course, he's a Bond villain, so it just can't be this simple. It can't just be a video game. So what he did to make this the stakes high in this game is that there's an electrical shock that comes through the joystick handles. And the way the game works is that if you're holding the handles and you're playing this game, but as you do worse in the game, the shock gets worse and worse and worse to the point where it'll kill you if you lose the game. It can happen to both sides depending on how good you play. But you always have the option to let go of the controls, and if you let go of the controls, you basically lose the game, you forfeit the game, but you save your life. So now the stakes are high. Now it's interesting, right? So now Bond is sitting there playing, and the villain is sitting there playing. They're both playing it, and, the villain is scoring points on Bond, and, it's shocking him, and you can tell, like, oh, this is hard to take. This is getting to dangerous levels. And then, Bond starts to win the game, and then, now the villain is getting the shock, and, he understands how this whole thing works. And there's this brilliant moment at the very end of this scene, which I always found had like a deep wisdom to it, which is that the Bond villain is getting to the point where, he's going to lose because James Bond has figured out how to beat him in this game, at his own game. And like, it's getting to the point where like everybody's watching and they think he's, the Bond villain is going to get electrocuted to death. And at the very, very end, he just lets go. He just lets go. And you can tell that like right there, if he held 1 second longer, it would have killed him. But the Bond villain, he was smart, right? That's what wisdom is. In life, you gotta understand your own self so well that you know when to let go. Sometimes you just gotta let go. And what I mean here specifically is like, you might be shooting for awakening and you might be doing some meditation retreat, and now you might be in such deep depression and misery, and you got to know like, okay, now I'm at the point where I just got to let it go. Stop this. Let me just go back to my old life. Let me stop the meditation for a while. Let me take 6 months off or a month off or whatever. Let me quit this retreat because I'm just not ready. I thought I was ready. I put in my best effort, but I'm not ready. See? And rather than taking it to some dangerous level where I actually hurt myself physically or psychologically or traumatize myself, I'll just let it go. Knowing that I can come back to it. There's no immediate need for you to get awakened right now. You can do it in a week, you can do it in a month, you can do it in a year. You've got quite a long life to live. And what you might discover from one of these retreats is you might discover that there's more basic stuff you got to handle before you're ready to fully surrender your material existence. See? And that's okay. Sometimes people email me or send me private messages through my forum, and they share some dark moment they're going through. They feel all alone, or they feel depressed, or they feel like life is meaningless, or they're having some kundalini symptom. They can't sleep, they're having anxiety, whatever. What's the solution to this stuff? Well, there's no way I can give you a concrete answer. It all depends on your specific situation. And really the solution is for you to better know your own self, not to ask me or some guru, but to dig inside of your own self and to be honest with yourself about where are you at? What can you tolerate? Is this healthy? Is it unhealthy? There are healthy ways of pursuing awakening and doing meditation, and there are unhealthy ways of doing it. If your meditation practice is making you more neurotic, if it's making you more of an asshole and less compassionate, if it's destabilizing your life where you feel like you're not able to go to work and just do the normal stuff you got to do, then you might be doing it in a dysfunctional, neurotic, unhealthy way. In which case, the lesson there is what would be a functional and a healthy way of doing it. See? And only you can figure that out for yourself. Of course, you can glean ideas from me and from other sources and people who have come before you, but ultimately you got to figure that out for yourself. And you got to know when to quit sometimes. Not permanently, but just, sometimes you get defeated. Sometimes you lose a few battles. That doesn't mean you lose the war. It just means you lost a few battles. Sometimes you need to make a strategic, tactical retreat. Because sometimes what can happen is actually, you push yourself too far, you overextend yourself, and then you kind of, you can make the path even longer for yourself. Like you might go do a retreat. The retreat will be so brutal to your ego that after you are done with that retreat, for example, you'll have such a huge backslide that you'll stop meditating for a year. And you won't go to another retreat for another 5 years because you were just so traumatized by this. You bit off more than you could chew. Or maybe psychedelics. Do you take too much psychedelics? This can definitely happen to you. And then what happens is that, people think that, psychedelics, Leo, I'm just going to keep upping the dose and take a large dose. Look, I did 5 tabs of LSD. I did 10 grams of mushrooms. I did 30 milligrams of 5-MeO. But then what happens is that you get freaked out one of these high doses on one of these high dose trips, and then you swear off psychedelics forever. And you're like, psychedelics are terrible and evil. No, they're not terrible and evil. You misuse them. And rather than being wise about it and going slowly, you try to do it all in one shot. And of course, you failed miserably. And then you tucked your tail between your legs and ran away. And now you're terrified to go back and try it again. Yeah, of course. This is the mark of an amateur. An amateur gets way in over his head into something to the point where he can't handle it, and then he has to back out, run away, and never face it again. This is how you fail. If you want to succeed, you got to take the slow tortoise approach. The tortoise wins the race. Slow and steady in this work.